I'm completely delighted to have been dusted off by Walter Chatham, your president, and set up to introduce one of my personal divinities, Renzo Piano. You will see me, I hope, as strictly an instrument of transition to get you from the last time to this time, with the deepest thanks to Gianfranco Monticelli and the Monticelli Press for getting us here again, and to Ken Frampton, who I started to say was going to introduce this after the pictures so we could be intelligent about it, but is actually going to serve as a distinguished plant to ask questions from the audience at the beginning of what we hope will be a good and lively discussion at the end. I would also ask you to bear in mind that part of your duties as you go out, as well as your pleasures, will be to turn slightly to your left where you will find copies of Mr. Piano's logbook at your disposition. Mr. Monticelli and everyone would welcome your participation in that part of the evening. Now, last time you remember was almost exactly 5 years ago in the context of the exhibition of the work of the Renzo Piano Building Workshop, which the League organized at the Urban Center. What we tried to suggest then about the work of the workshop was the way it seemed not just terrific per se, but as a wonderful ongoing manifestation of something ancient and very satisfying, a matching of architectural devices to their purposes, like the making of tools, but elevated to a high art. We saw in the inventions of the workshop, that is, a transforming ingenuity that it seemed safe to associate with the Italian Renaissance and its delight at the capacities we humans have to make extraordinary things to meet our needs. In the world of the workshop, we could say our most attractive ancestor, Homo faber, was alive and at work. At the end of the exhibition, you will remember, across one whole table was the almost unimaginable Kansai airport, huddled on its island, tuned by its jacks, and drooping purposefully into the surface of the earth. Kansai, I suppose, was the question left for us about what would come after, what might be the hard part in the future, in the works at a large scale that you can see amid the cranes of Berlin or on the waterfront of Amsterdam. In a time beguiled by the return of large buildings in the shapes of things, a time when our host, Mr. Harrison, is clearly once again walking about, could we still recognize that ingenious fitness of the instrument to the need that makes us feel good about ourselves and about what we can do about our condition? Kansai as built, I suspect, is its own answer. It's clearly not a bird, nor a plane, nor even Superman, but a device for aviation, an instrument in the service of the human enterprise by which, for better or for worse, we have shrunk the globe. Homo faber, that is clearly still alive and well. And indeed, tonight, he is among us. With the greatest delight, I give you Renzo Piano.
Is this working? Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, thank you, Paul. And I'm very pleased to be here to talk about this book. It's actually a very funny idea to make a book for an architect, especially because an architect should not say what he has to say by writing book, but by making buildings. That is what I normally do. But a couple of years ago, I started to feel guilty about not doing any educational work in some way. Then I went one day, for a few days, I went to a temple in Japan that is called Ise. I went there for a few days, and this is a very funny place in the middle of Japan where they built again every 20 years a temple. They have two sites, you have a temple, and every 20 years they do again on the next site. And they keep going like that since now 2,000 years. That is, of course, something difficult to understand. It's not just part of Japanese perversion, because I mean, it seems to be a bit funny, but you know, it's really in their culture to do this and to repeat things. An historical building in Japan is not something that is there since ever, but it's something that has been done again for a number of times. Still, 20 years is a bit too short. And then I understood why they were doing the new building every 20 years. Exactly the same. The reason is that the people going there when they are 20 years old are for the first time learning to make the temple. From 20 years to 40 years, they learn to make the temple. And then when they go there for the second time, they do the temple. When they are between 40 and 60 years old, they do the temple. And when they go there for the third time, from 40 to 60, from 60 to 80, they go there to teach to make the temple. And this is a very nice metaphor. It's not a metaphor, it's reality. That's what they do. It's a metaphor of life in the sense. And I was at that time approaching 60. I'm now 60. And so I felt that something probably got to be done not to teach, but to tell other people experience. And also I understood that time even more that when you try to do some education to young people, you should not tell them what to do. This is the wrong thing to do. You have to explain what is the pleasure of invention. You have to switch on a sparkle in the spirit of young people. You have to teach the surprise that young people find sometimes, that doing things, drawing, sketching, working, something happens. You know, it's a kind of surprise that happens sometimes. There's a moment when young people understand that the hand goes faster than the mind, and what they do physically. It's very important. This is actually what happened a long time ago in the Renaissance shop, what is in Italian is called bottega. And what is worth doing then is giving examples. So I decided very modestly, actually, because you can't do too much, but to write a book that is an adventure book. It's a book telling stories, not a book of architecture. It's a book telling stories. So I tried to tell 50 stories in this book, stories of real things happening. And it's an adventure book because, my God, adventure. It's an adventure book because, as I'm joking in the book, I mean, being an architect is a bit like being Robinson Crusoe, you know, and every time you land in a new island and you start again a new adventure, you have new material, you have new situation. As an architect, you look always for Atlantis. You look for a better world. You need that kind of utopia, otherwise you are lost. It's adventure being architect because architecture is the oldest profession in the world. Or there is another one that looks also very old, but and it's also very similar sometimes, but it's really very old profession. It's very old. It's a bit like hunting. It's a bit like exploring seas. It's an incredible adventure. And since ever, even when making architecture was creating a shelter, it wasn't just a technical activity. It was also a symbolic activity. Never building has been just a technical action. It was always a symbolic action, expression of something. It's also adventurous architecture because it's art, of course. It's a great art, but it's art at the frontier of art. It's continuously contaminated by other disciplines, by other things. The frontier between architecture and science, geography, topography, history, expression, art, is not existing. There is a continuous permeability. There is a continuous contamination. As an architect, you should plug your inspiration to real life. Otherwise, you end quickly to academy, because you start quoting somebody else. I mean, the only safety is when you plug directly to life. It's more difficult, but it's part of the game. So all those arguments are making, for me, architecture a great adventure. Now, what I want to do is to take you for a ride through a number of projects that, of course, in the book are more numbers, but I mean, I will try to do this now, and we may try to come to some conclusion later on. Can I have the light switch off? Well, we may start from Saint-Beaubourg. It's, okay, here we are. We're in Paris. Long time ago now. That was a competition we won together with Richard Rogers, our over-European partners, the engineers. It was a great provocation in the middle of Paris. That was an adventure, because before that job, my work has been almost practically experimenting with material. I was born in a family of builders, and that's the reason why for the first 4 or 5 years has been experimenting with light structure, with light material, but I didn't go further. And this was the case where all this was mixing with a provocation, a social provocation. Landing with this funny airship in the middle of Paris was part of the provocation. It was socially very important, because it was at the beginning of the 70s, a moment when cultural center didn't practically exist, and the museum were quite dusty and annoying places, boring places. And so the provocation, if you prefer, the desecration was to suggest, instead of a typical institutional building, something that was creating curiosity. So the life in the piazza, the strong relationship between the building and the street, the piazza, was a very important point. Art, but not just art. I mean, Beaubourg has been visited in the last 20 years by under 50 million visitors. Is now closed for more than 1 year to re-establish the internal use of the building, not to make maintenance. I mean, that's done, but this is a small perversion of newspaper. They like that idea, but it's actually closed because we are taking all the office out and we are adding new activities. What we did is that we convinced the French government to do this. I mean, I actually suggest the minister to close every quarter of a century the building for 1 year to rethink the use of the building. He wasn't very happy about this idea. But he said, okay, let's do it the first time. The next one will be somebody else. But just to say that this building was not a sort of a gigantic celebration of high technology, it was more a parody of technology. The real provocation was to introduce this sort of machine or tool for culture in a moment when we were very young. I mean, Richard and myself, we were about 30, I was 33, he was 36. We were really bad boys, very impolite, that's for sure. And this was a provocation. Let's move on, because I mean, at that time, I didn't know too much about art. I started to understand a bit more about art when more recently, I mean, a few years later after Beaubourg, we started to work with art. For example, we made a big exhibition, Calder, and then we started to understand more and more about art. Beaubourg was more about a cultural center. It was kind of a medieval village in which you go for something, to read a book, and then you fall in, by chance, in a beautiful exhibition of art, or you go to take coffee and you do something else. All this mix of function was the real point. After that, the Menil Collection Houston was, this was 81, 82, we finished Beaubourg in 77. This was the opposite in a sense. If Beaubourg was the desecration, the Menil Collection Houston was the consecration of a museum. Beaubourg was built in Paris, a city with too much of memory, and this was built in Houston, that is a city with not enough memory. So we did the opposite. We built, you can see there in the plan, we built the Menil Collection in the middle of a village that is a kind of general place for the Menil Foundation. We work with Dominique de Menil. She is a great client. She has been a great client, and she still is a great client. We work with Peter Rice, the engineer that has been starting to work with me in Beaubourg, and then since then we worked together for 20 years, up to when he disappeared, unfortunately, and that was a great loss. In that time there, we work on elements like natural lighting, by example. We work out a system for the roof that is there. We show you the concept of that roof. The concept is this one. We have leaves in ferrocement. The light comes through, and it comes down, never in a dark form. Can I come back now? Oh, no, impossible. It doesn't go back. It doesn't go back. No, I wanted to show you. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I mean, I wanted to say something about the atmosphere. I mean, no occasion in the work on my office, we have been always very interested in the immateriality of space. And the quality of light here is very important, and the rarefication of atmosphere is very important. We work here in this job having a fantastic collection of pieces of art, learning more and more about art. The space inside, it's very much about the complexity of different planes. If you look at that picture there, for example, we are in the room here with piece of art, then we have a second plane that is there with the garden, then we have a third plane with another room, then we have a fourth plane that is another garden, and this sense of infinite, of multiple plane is the expression of emotion that we wanted to create in this building. Emotion that is very much about contemplation, of course. I mean, Beaubourg was about participation. This building was about meditation and contemplation. Well, not just that, of course. We also wanted to show to the street, to put in connection with the street, all the secret activity of the typical museum. This is a matting and framing workshop. This is a rehabilitation shop. And there is always a relationship between the building and the street. After that, we have done in the rehabilitation field work in Paris for Schlumberger. On this job, we started a number of experiences that continued later on the rehabilitation. And when you start to work on rehabilitation, you enter in a different world, because then you start to get in the ambiguity and complexity of maintaining the sense of memory of a place and mixing the past with the present. And in this job here, for example, we did a lot of work in keeping the spirit of the building there that were built in the 20s. With the new building, we work with nature. We put water there. We brought life to that water. We introduced something that was then seminal to other experience later on, as well as an experiment that we did for UNESCO long time ago. That was also 81, I believe. About that time, it was an experimentation about building. This workshop was built in the old historical center, and the scheme was about participation. That was essential for me and for the entire office, because you know, the art of listening to people, listening, understanding the need of people is one of the most difficult tasks. Participation is a very difficult word. I mean, listening doesn't mean that you have to do exactly what people ask you to do, but it's essential to understand. It's essential to understand, and it's essential not just a social scheme like this, but all time. Here, for example, here we are in Paris, in Rue de Meaux. We made this housing complex for under 50 flat. We didn't talk to users because that building was done for the Cité de Paris. But of course, it was essential of the experience of understanding the need of people. It's a very simple scheme. This is the courtyard. We have birch trees there that are there. This is a terracotta and GRC. And on this scheme, we started to work on something that appeared at that time in our office life, that we may call the ornament, the research on the grain, on the texture of a facade, of a building, and not decoration. I'm talking about ornament. That is a very, very important thing. I mean, building has lost a lot of quality. In this building, you feel the trace of the hand in some way, as Peter was saying. Of course, those pieces are made by machine, but you still can see the piece well done, the crafted piece. The art and craft tradition has been showing so much of this. This is an elevation. This is another picture. Of course, everything in this building is about atmosphere, including the trees. We selected those trees because they are very light and they have the same grain of the building. So this attitude I'm trying through the slide to give you the story, the itinerary of the office on different arguments. Working on terracotta that wasn't the first time we worked in terracotta, the small tower for IRCAM, that is a musical building in Paris, and then later we work with terracotta very much again, up to now, when we are making ceramic most of the building in Potsdamer Platz in Berlin. And I always liked the idea of using all the material that belong to our deep memory, like terracotta or wood or stone, even stone. We are right now building a big church in south of Italy where we use stone. And those materials are fantastic because they are part of ourselves. But at the same time, we may reinvent completely the way to do them. Here again, this spirit of complexity, of texture, and playing with those things. And the color, of course. And more recently, we have done on the same spirit in Lyon, France. The Cité Internationale is also a space, is a street, is a long street, is now, and this is the first piece. The street will be 750 meters long when it will be finished. And we use terracotta in a different version, of course. In this case, is extruded terracotta. We use the terracotta to create the sense of unity and also the vibration of light and the color. And we also introduced the first time in this building in Lyon the use of double skin. This is a double skin that is a quite interesting reinvention of the winter garden concept, the old winter garden that we use in the more recently again in the tower for Daimler-Benz in Berlin, to the point that we were able to not to do air conditioning in the building. And that tower in Berlin is probably the first modern tower without air conditioning, because by using this system, we were able to warm up in the winter and to cool down by natural ventilation in the summer. So this was also a seminal scheme for that reason. Coming back to the argument of rehabilitation, I have been always attracted by historical places because they provide a sort of natural discipline to the work. Here we are in Genoa, my hometown, where we have done in the Old Harbor quite big rehabilitation project for 5 or 6 different buildings in the same area. Sometimes, like here, it's just a rehabilitation of a building of the 17th century. Sometimes, like here, is building a new aquarium, or here is making a protected piazza by using something that is a clear allusion to element of the harbor. Here is the aquarium, and this is inside one of the buildings built at the beginning of the century. I'm talking about this because working in historical context, and especially in the harbor context, is one of our passion, and this was a sort of preparation to a scheme that we have just finished. It was opened in May this year in Amsterdam. Here we are in the center of Amsterdam. This is what is called the Oosterdok, the old harbor of Amsterdam. The Berlagebeurs is there. Here is the old center. We got this piece of land that is not land, it's a tunnel. You see, that's a tunnel going down and going under the water. And we got that piece of land to build a museum for science, a new metropolis. The building was built there. It's there. It's a bit like a ship sinking in some way. It's completely finished in copper. This is the geometry of the building. You go up to the building by this ramp. You go up and you enter in the building from there, and then you go down. This is the ramp. You go up. This is the only public piazza of Amsterdam that is sur-elevated, so you can see the city from there. Is watching this way, I mean, is watching south, so the older city, because then the piazza is actually open to the city and is also acting as an entrance. The reason is also very practical. It's not just semantic. It's also because we got to find the place, the physical place. The building is receiving something like 5,000 or 6,000 people a day, young people mainly, and we need a space, we need a piazza. We can't put the piazza there because, as you say, have you seen in the picture at the beginning, we have no place left. It's just a pier. So we got to put the piazza on top of that. Of course, this is the inside of the building. It's made of 5 floors. It's a science museum with interactive. Of course, the big example was the Exploratorium in San Francisco as a reference. Here we are talking about biology, physics, and also communication. It's a quite complex building. Here again, another vision. This is copper. It's a pre-oxidated copper. And this is the funny presence of the building in the middle of the harbor. This is more like an object. The difficult job here was to put the building in an historical context without trying to hide it. On the same plane, bit before, we have complete for the 90 this stadium in the south of Italy. Well, here is quite visible one thing that is for me very important is the relationship between the topography of the place. You see, we built a hill going up. This is the hill going up. And this is what they call the topography, the topos of the place. And on top of that, we put this building that is made of 26 of those petals. Each of those petals contain a bit more than 2,000 people. The entire building contains 65,000 people. It's a building, it's a sculpture, it's a kind of gigantic sculpture. This is during construction. Here again is the love for the peace making the organism. I mean, each petal is made then by 12 of those elements of prefabricated, precast concrete. It's quite absurd presence in the middle of the plain there. Is in south of Italy, is near Bari. This is the section showing the bottom part, that is the topography. and this part that is sitting as an object on top of the topography of the place. Of course, here the game is about compression and expansion of space. The game is about perforation. Those empty spaces have a very strong functional reason. I mean, every one of those petals contain a bit more than 2,000 people. That is the manageable quantity of people in case of panic. And that moment when we built this building, it was a very difficult moment because a lot of accidents happened in the stadium in Europe. The research here was also about lightness. I mean, how to make out of a heavy material like a concrete a light object flying above the ground. So this was, in a sense, a different experiment from what I showed before. And now we come to Kansai Airport. This is the island built in the middle of the Kansai Bay, Osaka Bay. This is Kobe. This is Osaka. Kyoto is over there. All that region makes more than 15 million inhabitants. The island is there. This is the island. And we have built this building that is 1.7 kilometers long. It's an immense building. It's a bit like an immense glider you see there. Of course, it's difficult to say how much of the final result of this is due to formal research or symbolic research or to physics. I mean, this building was designed together, of course, with Peter Rice. It was curved like that, as you can see, because we wanted to make a shell structure very, very, very light and very flexible. Actually, during the earthquake of Kobe 2 years ago, more, 3 years ago, we were in big trouble because this building was right in the middle of the earthquake. This point there has been moving like that, 40 centimeters during the earthquake. But we didn't break even a piece of glass because the building was done expressly for that. Actually, the building was built in 36 months, and we got something like at least 36 earthquakes during construction. But that one was really big one. Here on the right, don't worry too much, it's just a joke showing the building in the middle of Hyde Park in London, just to give it the size of the building. It's an immense, gigantic object. It's almost like a topographic element. You can see here on this picture on the side the curve of the building. The skin is made out of 80,000 pieces of stainless steel. This is the total geometry of the project. Here is a picture on site, on the roof. Those sections here are the progressive section of the building through all the entire building, from one end to the other. The geometry of this building is very complex. It's difficult to say where aesthetic stop and technology start. This is a vision of the internal space of the wing that are the places from where you take the plane. It's very easy from a point of view of self-orientation. In this building that is designed for 100,000 passengers a day, it's difficult to get lost. It's impossible to get lost because you see actually the plane through the window there. You see the plane, you get in the building, you turn right or left, you take the train, you go to the boarding bridge. It's practically impossible to lose the direction. But of course, I show this picture because it's quite evident the desire, again, of a space, of a kind of space that is, by the way, is infinite in the sense. It doesn't have the end. And this is also due to the fact that the perspective is exaggerated by the change in level. In this position here, we have 18-meter headroom. And there at the end, you saw before the curve of the building, we have only 6 meters. So the building comes down, and of course, it's like a cathedral in the sense. It's like a gigantic cathedral. I still don't understand how we were able to do it for the Japanese, because, I mean, when they saw the building finished, they were very surprised themselves. And here you have the pieces making that space. We made those pieces in England, and we made a lot of pieces for this job somewhere else. The building was built everywhere in the world. That is, by the way, new in the art of making building today. This is a funny picture that I love very much, because this is, we got on this site, on this job specifically, we got on site 10,000 workers for 3 years, a bit more, 38 months. The job was perfectly on time. On this specific building, we got almost 7,000 people working there. They were meeting at the beginning of the day like that, in a group of about 2,000. Here they are making gymnastics for 10 minutes with a kind of a Japanese Jane Fonda singing, and very absolutely frightening from some point of view, because it was like a soldier, but the site was perfectly organized. We didn't get any accident on this job. It was on time. Very remarkable and very reliable process of making building. This is a view of the structure. It's almost organic, that structure. Of course, the organicity was not there since the beginning. It became like that. And this is the point up there that has been moving 40 centimeters during the earthquake. And of course, the connection between that glass and that structure is very, very clever, because otherwise you break everything in case of an earthquake. This is a vision of a garden inside the building, and the relationship between nature outside and the building inside has been very strong. Talking about nature, I jump here back from Japan to our workshop in Genoa. It's not far from Genoa. You can see here, the workshop is there. We have no road going there, so we take a lift that goes up like that. It's a sort of glass house. I'm showing this not because it's especially interesting, but because this is our place. It's the place where we are, where we live. This is our system to get in the office. When it doesn't work, you have to make 400 steps up. That is not very practical. It's a kind of monastery in a way. And in this building, we do a lot of seminar work. We have the main office in Paris, but here is where we do all the seminars. Here is where we do workshop activity. Of course, here we have all the modern possibility to communicate in the world, because from here we work right now, for example, in this country, and we work in Sydney. We are making a tower in Sydney, and we communicate from this part of the world to everywhere. So we have, of course, the most modern technology in communication, but we also have what is quite essential sometimes is the silence and time to think about, and also to experiment things. I mean, we have a workshop there, and this is just a symbol of the workshop. It doesn't mean anything, just the fact that we enjoy working physically on materials and testing and making not really presentation model, but prototypes. And making prototypes is a very important thing, because it's a casting of love for detail. It's a casting of love for the well-crafted piece of architecture. And that is essential. I think this is one of the most essential things to preserve in our profession. Jumping somewhere else and going back to art, quite recently we have opened in Paris a Brancusi atelier. It's a small museum for Brancusi atelier. It's again a building where we have been working with natural lighting. Natural light is coming from there. It's a funny problem, because Brancusi left to the French government all the collection at the one condition, that everything was kept in the atelier. And here then the atelier is part of the museum. It's actually incrustated in the museum. And here is again an example of working with light. It's in Houston, Texas. It's close to the Menil Collection. It's a small museum for Ise Twombly, the artist. This was a quite interesting job with Brancusi. Unfortunately, the dialogue was at distance. Here with Ise Twombly, the dialogue was direct because Ise has been participating to the work. And here again, we have been working on something that we have been working out very carefully in the recent time, is the condition of conservation and natural light in museum for art. And here I come to the most recent work we have done for museum, is the Beyeler Museum in Basel. It's a great collection. It's a collection of modern art. It's a sitting in the museum right in the middle of a park. And the roof system, we got to work out a system where the building energy consumption got to be cut down 4 times in relationship to what we did, by example, in Houston, Texas, 15 years before. And this because of the European and Swiss rules. So the main work there was again the main technical work was about lighting. This diagram is showing the plenum that is that roof there. In the roof is a plenum where we have ventilation and where we stop the radiation of the light. Those are pictures showing the roof, showing the stone that is creating the bottom part of the building. In this picture, you may see better. There is here we have ivy growing up. All this is the earth. This is the topographic element, and this is like a light sculpture flying above it. Those are vision in the night. You can see the stone there and the roof up there. This is an example of one of those rooms. The light, the natural light is beautiful. It's very, very good. This building is totally lighted by natural light. It closed down. It closed at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, so it lives in natural light. We have been doing a lot of work outside in the garden, and again here you can see the spirit of doing something that is very strongly rooted to the land, this part, and this part that is floating above it. This is one famous piece of the collection, is a Claude Monet. And of course the relationship between this painting and that pond of water and the garden is very important. So we have been working again. Actually the advantage here was to have the collection. So the building was actually a portrait of the collection. It was done expressly for the collection. Every piece of art has been positioned. Talking about music for a while, we have been also working a lot on music. This is a picture of the Prometheus that was an opera made by Luigi Nono long time ago now. We built for that opera a sort of harmonic chamber in wood. So the opera and the space for the opera came together. And more recently, we have built in Lingotto, that is a big old factory in Turin from Fiat. We have built a big concert room that is like an instrument. It's like a musical instrument. It's actually done as an instrument to listen music instead of making music, but it's a bit like an instrument. And those are other views of the same building. Those are the Berliner rehearsing. And this is another job we are now building. It will be finished in 2 years' time. Is in Rome. Is the new auditorium in Rome. This is a new auditorium for 2,700 people. This is another one for 1,200, and then we have another one for 500. And those musical instruments They are made of wood and roofed with lead. They are sitting on this building that is, again, very well rooted to the ground. It's actually made, that part of the building is made of bricks. And this is the model of the big auditorium for 2,700. You can understand from that picture that this is really designed as an instrument. And I'm showing this picture just to understand one thing, that I was talking about art, the frontier of art. Here, by example, we are making with a specialist from Müller. Helmut Müller is a great acoustician in Europe, a German one. We are making in a big model that is scale 1 to 15, I believe, 1 to 15 or 1 to 20, I don't remember. We are making tests with real sound. We are actually projecting sound at high frequency there, and we measure the time, reverberation time, all that. So when you design something, it's quite difficult then at the end to say how much of that final result is the artistic pleasure of the architect to create good harmony or good proportion, and how much is coming from the objective need of music, of sound. It's always very difficult because all those elements are feeding architecture. And it's difficult then at a certain moment to decide exactly where one stops and the other one starts. Very quickly here, we are in the south of Italy where we are building a church. It's right there in this site. This is before we started. Now the site is going on. It will be finished in about 2.5 years. It's a church. All those arches are in stone. Actually, this arch is the opening of the church to the piazza. We are working with artists on this church as well. On this opening here, by example, Bob Rauschenberg is designing the Apocalypse. So we will also introduce art. This is a section. Here again is very strong, the connection between the topography of the land that is sloping down, is made of stone, because it's actually dig in the stone. It's like a sculpture dig in the stone, and the stone making the arches and the real church. This is, again, another view, and those are details of the arch. Each piece of that arch is made of stone. I said before about my interest, personal interest, and our work on material that belong to the history of architecture, like stone. But stone today may be reinvented, you know, because you have a fantastic machine that may do perfect cut. Then you put cable inside and you stabilize the arch, because here we are in a seismic zone. So the reinvention, like for the terracotta or for the wood, for other material like that, or the concrete, the Menil Collection leaves. The structure, the roof was made of concrete, but used in a special way that is called ferrocement, because actually the steel is more than the concrete over there. So reinventing all the material is it's a very interesting experience. And here we jump to the other side of the world. We are in New Caledonia. That is a fantastic island between New Zealand and Australia. This is the site before we started. And this is the job, is a culture center for Kanaki. And Kanaki are one of the big ethnic culture there, together with Maori and Aborigine. And it's a great culture. It's mainly material. It's made of dance, songs, sometimes some piece of wood as a piece of art. Those elements there that are part of our scheme are very much related to local culture and anthropology. I'm showing those slides because I think that this job is right at the edge, the limit, talking about frontier between architecture and other disciplines, between architecture and anthropology. We have worked out, not in literary sense. By example, this is the structure, the wood structure of one of those cases, one of those elements. We have 10 of them. And the real size of this is sometime, the biggest one are 28 meters up. They're almost 30 meters, so they are like cathedral. They're made out of iroko, wood. Here on the right you see test on the wind tunnel showing the reason of this shape. The monsoon and the Alizé are blowing this way all time. So on this face of the building we have overpressure wind, and on the other side we have underpressure. So the air is doing this and is creating a ventilation. That is actually what you see there. You see from the smoke. And this is also coming from their cultural attitude. That is great. Of course, in the Pacific area you find things that are incredible. And if you look more carefully, the surface of the building, this is a picture taken on site 6 months ago. Here again, the frontier between ornament, the research of a grain, of a texture, and anthropology or local culture, and the science. That frontier is very difficult to find because the spacing of those elements, you see, is growing up, is given by a lot of studies we have done in order to avoid turbulence in the wind. So in order to create the underpressure that is essential to create ventilation. So the design of this was coming from a joint effort that is it's fed by different attitude. Here we are not far from there in Sydney, where we are building exactly there in this position at the edge of the botanical garden that is there, about 600 meters from the Sydney Opera House. We are building this tower. It is 200 meters up in the air. It's very interesting to work in Sydney. Australia is a land, is a culture with a lot of sensitivity to environmental elements. We have been working out the shape of the tower in such a way that we avoid turbulence. And this is a diagram showing the forces of the wind on different parts of the building. We avoid turbulence and we create on the north side there, that is where they have the sun and the sea, we create every floor a winter garden so that you can open the window. This is a very simple thing, to be able to open a window in the tower is quite essential. I mean, the tower are normally very arrogant, the symbol, they are very hermetic, they are closed. It's quite important, and in that country, everybody is very sensitive about relationship with nature, with the breeze, with the wind, with the view, with the sun, energy consumption. Here we use those skin of glass to collect energy and to interchange energy with the environment. And those are studies of the tower. It's another job where we try to push the limit of how you say, connection between the form of the building and the spirit of the building and the functionality of the building. And here, those are the last slides I want to show you. We are in Berlin. This is the most recent and most difficult job we have. It's an immense job. Here we are in Potsdamer Platz before the war, and this is after the war. This picture is very important because it's showing that the desert of the Potsdamer Platz in the last 50 years was not there immediately after the war. Immediately after the war, it was destroyed, but still there. It was just enough to build the building where they were. Actually, everybody wanted to forget about the war, so the desert was actually built by urbanists and by politicians more than by the bombs, because after that picture, everything was taken down, and then in '61 they built the wall. The wall was built there, right there. That's Potsdamer Platz. They built the wall was built there. So the desert was due to the desire of innocence of Berliner. That is, of course, understandable. It did happen again. When in 89 the wall fell down, in a few months it disappeared. When they made the competition, we came to the site for the competition. I found no piece of wall there. That was a difficult thing to understand, but everything went out. So we made the competition. That was 92. We won the competition. Everything was connected to this point that is this piazza, is the center of the composition. This is the old Potsdamer Strasse, the Alte Potsdamer Strasse. This is the Potsdamer Platz, and this is the Scharoun State Library, this one. Here, right here is the National Gallery of Miss van der Rohe, and over there is the Philharmonie of Scharoun, where the Berliner play. Well, we are responsible for the entire job there, and then the job was so big, and also it was so difficult to keep everything under our control, because, you know, a city, and this is a piece of a city, is a powerful piece of a city, it's not a village. A city is by definition multiform and complex. It's like a kaleidoscope. You cannot design in 5, 6, 7 years everything. So we designed this building, that, and that. We designed 8 buildings. The first one that was complete last week is this one, is the headquarters of Daimler-Benz. And now we are going on, and in 2 years' time, all this will be finished. So we are designing those 8 buildings. Those are designed by Richard Rogers. This is done by Isozaki. This is done by Rafael Moneo. This is done by Hans Koloff. Other architects joined the group, working inside the discipline, the basic discipline. Water here, that water is one strong presence in this scheme. This is the piazza that is not totally pedestrian. You have some traffic going there. Well, this is what we call the Sacred Mountain of Scharoun, this one, and we add this theater and this casino. It's very important to understand that probably the reason, not probably, I'm sure, the reason why we won the competition was the fact that we were able to mix function. Around that piazza I showed you before, we found everything, sacred and profane. We found the theater, the casino, the library, an hotel, shopping street, shopping zone, shops. We found the cinemas, Omnimax, office building. Is in the sense the spirit of a mix of function, and the piazza remain the fundamental piece of the composition in an old European humanistic culture. This is an elevation of all the building. This is the one that has been finished right now. Well, this is a picture of the Daimler-Benz building a few months ago. Those are a detail of the research we have done here on the use of ceramic. Those pieces are extruded pieces of ceramic. Those are cast pieces of ceramic. It's very important to find details that are strong, robust. In the same time, they are inspiring. They give a color. They give a kind of joy. In the same time, they are strong, and they work very well. This is a vision of the building from south. And this one, this is the Daimler-Benz building. This is the internal atrium. This is a picture of the model. And this is the ceiling that is done by glass. Here is another building that is not far from Daimler-Benz. It's one of our 8 buildings. It's an Omnimax, that is a cinema with 360 degrees screen. It's like a moon. It's like a gigantic moon falling in the middle of Berlin. And actually here is a test we made on site. We projected the moon image on the surface, turning, gently turning. And it, of course, is absurd. It's absurd, totally absurd. But you know, a city is, as I said, is multiform. A city is a place where you have to be careful not to end by making uniformity. Unity is okay, is correct. Uniformity is wrong. A city, in a sense, is a place where you find unexpected things. The city is a meeting point, is a place of... Well, of course, it's very difficult, you know, to build a complex scheme like this in 5, 7 years. Actually, we start on 92, everything will be finished 99, so that will be 7 years. It's really too short. It's too short because the beauty of city is normally coming from the fact that they are made by time. Cities are beautiful because they are the mirror of 1,000 stories, life stories. In this case, I mean, cities, to be honest, are not something you design. They just happen to be. I mean, they become a city. They grow organically. When you do something like that, you are almost against nature. Not really, but almost. So you are working in a very difficult condition. And this is a picture I want to show you because I was talking about adventure. And the adventure we got on this side that is not finished yet, we are incredible. I mean, by example, this is a picture taken the winter before last on the site. You have ice there. What happened is that the city of Berlin didn't allow us to pump out the water from the site. As everywhere normally, except in New York, normally when you dig in the ground, in Berlin anyway, that's what happened. At the 4-meter depth, you find the water. It's the water table. Normally, you pump out the water and you do the foundation, and then you make the building. In this case, the site was so immense. This is a site that is worth totally $3 billion. So it's an immense site. And so we were not allowed to pump the water because otherwise the water table level was going down 50 centimeters with a dramatic result for the Tiergarten, that is the garden not far away. So the solution was easy. We call divers. This is one of those. Divers that were normally they were Russian, coming from Odessa, big man, strong. And for 1 year, they've been diving and actually building foundation underwater at 15-meter depth. And that was a decision that cost to the site something like under $20 million extra dollars, I mean, on the side. But we got no choice. I mean, but that decision was taken in, say, 2 months, very quick decision. And the site is always big like that. It's a big adventure. And I may try to end my conversation on this argument, if I can have the light back again, talking about adventure, because, of course, adventure in architecture is on site. This is an example, the diver. Many other. But what is less evident that architecture is also a great adventure when you sit on the drawing board and you draw. It's a great adventure because you know, it's not really like somebody may think about, that is a linear process where you think something and then somebody else does it. I mean, it's a circular process. It's a circular process where you come back all time from thinking, testing, doing, rethinking again. It's a circular process. It's a kind of exploration. I say in the book, by joking, that in the world where everything has been already explored, from Christopher Columbus to James Cook, everything has been already discovered. So we are left with only the adventure of spirit, the exploration of spirit. That is almost true. It's quite true. And architecture is one of those adventurous spirits. There are moments when, in the process of designing, understanding the problem, trying to get inspiration from reality of things, you don't see the solution. Then you have to have the courage to watch in the dark, to watch with obstination in the dark, with some insolence sometimes. And obstination, you know very well, is one of the most important qualities of human being, especially for an architect. There is a kind of obstination without which you remain at the periphery of art. You don't get in art. I mean, you stay away. I mean, obstination is essential. Without that obstination, you don't get there, that's for sure. And adventure is then also because there is a kind of constant temptation during the process of design to simplify things. This is something I have already said, but I think it's worth saying. There are contradictions in life and in art and in architecture, like the contradiction between freedom and the discipline. But you cannot simplify things. You cannot find a solution. You have to accept that. In architecture, a total freedom is a mistake. It's a problem. Stravinsky, the musician, said beautiful word on this. I mean, the need of discipline. For an artist, you need the discipline. Of course, you need the freedom. Freedom of spirit, political freedom, physical freedom, but you need obligation on the creative work. Otherwise, you are in trouble. And there is also a temptation to solve, to simplify the relationship between art and technology. This is even more complicated. People believe sometimes that art is something, technology is what is necessary to make art existing. But it's not like that. It's much more complicated. It's not like that in architecture. It's not like that in every kind of artistic discipline. If you take a musician, that is then even more evident. If you take a Kate Jarrett concert, or I am a very good friend that is called Maurizio Pollini. He's a great pianist. If you look at those guys playing, you realize that they have metabolized so well their technique of playing. They master so well technique that they may forget about it. So they close their eyes and they play, and then it's pure poetry. But this is not because technique is different from art, because it's the same thing. They come together. They come together. But the temptation is always to separate those things and to say, okay, that's the idea and that's the practicality. And there is also another great contradiction, ambiguity, that is normally a temptation to solve in very simplistic way, is the relationship between tradition and modernity. And this is, again, very complicated, because somebody believes that tradition and modernity are one against the other. But this is absolutely nonsense, because there is no modernity without history. There are also beautiful words from Luis Borges, the poet, saying that making a creative work is like being suspended between remembering things and forgetting things. You remember something from yourself, from other people, thanks God, and then you forget things, and then you have black holes that you fill with invention. But there is a continuity between the past and the future, between tradition and invention. So all those things, all those contradictions are actually things that you cannot solve, you cannot simplify. They practically say all, they tell the same story. They just tell the story that life is complicated and art is even more. You cannot simplify. You have to accept that complexity. And this is a bit the end for myself. Is my log, is my direction, is my compass. To look something that is, of course, difficult to get. It's a kind of humanistic approach where I feel very strongly myself that sentiment, where I have a very strong love for tradition, for history. I should say I have a grateful love for tradition, because tradition is, especially for somebody growing up in a country where even paving a street has been in the past art. You know, Italy has been that for a long time, for long centuries. No more, unfortunately, but has been like that. So for me, it's a grateful love for tradition, the one I have, because it's a bit like a net underneath the acrobat. You are there, you jump up and down, but you have a net that gives you security. But in the same time, I really feel a great love for exploration, research, and invention. And in some way, this may be a direction to go to have a humanistic approach to life and also to architecture. Thank you very much.